In the quiet hum of a dimly lit parking lot, emotions swirled like storm clouds ready to burst. The air crackled with tension as Alex sat in his car, bracing himself for the encounter he had both dreaded and anticipated. Holly, once a radiant figure in his life, now stood before him in tattered clothes that spoke volumes of her turmoil. Her hair, unkempt and wild, framed a face streaked with tears, mirroring the chaos of their shattered relationship. The moment was heavy with unspoken words and unresolved feelings, each a reminder of a past filled with both love and betrayal. As Holly unleashed her pent-up anger, Alex could feel the weight of their shared history pressing down on him. It was a confrontation neither had wanted, yet here they were, on the precipice of a conversation that would irrevocably change the course of their lives. A new chapter, Alex's journey of reclamation and resolve. It has been a decade since I last sat in a job interview, but here I am at the age of 44, ready to embark on a new path. My name is Alex Price, and I'm a mechanical design engineer. Recently, I relocated to this area, and as fate would have it, the company I'm interviewing with used to be one of my fiercest competitors. I can't shake the feeling that they'll see my potential and offer me a position once they grasp what I bring to the table. But this job search is about more than just professional ambition, it's part of a larger plan to reclaim my life from the grip of my unfaithful wife. I first crossed paths with Holly in 1993, and even now, I can vividly recall the captivating young woman she was back then. Beautiful, confident, and full of life, she was the center of attention wherever she went. I, on the other hand, was a shy and introverted guy, molded by a demanding mother and her equally unkind daughters. My childhood was marked by the incessant bullying from my older sisters, Megan and Anna, who were 13 and 10 years my senior. They constantly reminded me that I was an unplanned mistake, a mere burden that contributed to my parents' divorce when my father walked out on us in 1976, leaving my mother to raise me alone. Fast forward to the present day, and I find myself stepping into the office of Robert Williams, the owner of Sudden Hydraulics. As I entered his imposing office, I was immediately struck by his warmth and approachability, a stark contrast to the harsh environment I was leaving behind at Walker Engineering. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Williams," I said, taking a seat. "Please, call me Robert," he replied, his demeanor friendly and welcoming. "I'm surprised to hear you're leaving Walker Engineering, Mr. Price." "Alex," I corrected him with a smile, eager to shed the formalities. "I can't wait to move on from there. They've done great work, but I'm ready for a change." He studied me for a moment, a mix of curiosity and concern flickering in his eyes. "I understand. But why the hurry?" I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to divulge the personal turmoil that drove my decision. I've worked hard for the past decade, and it feels like my contributions have gone unnoticed. It's frustrating when your efforts aren't appreciated. Robert nodded thoughtfully, clearly intrigued. "I'm glad to hear you're motivated. I want you here, Alex. I can offer you the package you requested, a significant raise. But I also understand you're interested in a commission structure for bringing in new contracts?" "Exactly," I confirmed, relieved to see his interest. "I have extensive experience working with clients, and I understand the market inside and out. With your team's expertise and my designs, we can position ourselves as the industry leaders." As we shook hands, I saw a glimmer of integrity in Robert's eyes. With this new opportunity, I was one step closer to executing my plan, not just professionally, but personally. Now, back to my wife, Holly. Our love story began at Kingston University in South London, where she was finishing her degree in creative writing, and I was completing my master's in mechanical engineering. I remember feeling intimidated by her beauty and confidence. Standing at 5 feet 5 inches with striking brown hair and captivating brown eyes, Holly was the kind of woman who drew admirers effortlessly. Surprisingly, it was one of her friends who approached me at a party, and to my astonishment, Holly joined us. My shyness, which had always held me back, seemed to intrigue her, and soon we were dating. It wasn't long before I lost my virginity to her, and although I cherished those early months, whispers of her infidelity began to surface. I had little evidence and was too afraid to confront her about it. Holly was a product of her upbringing, spoiled and accustomed to being the center of attention. Throughout our relationship, she often acted like a princess, throwing fits when things didn't go her way, even in public. My friends urged me to walk away, but I was blinded by love and my own insecurities. After graduation, we landed jobs and rented a cozy apartment near Southampton, where her family hailed from. A year later, we tied the knot, and shortly after, welcomed our first daughter, Sophie, followed by Ava a few years later. Holly embraced motherhood wholeheartedly, and for a time, it felt like we had the perfect life. My career flourished as I climbed the corporate ladder at Walker Engineering, leading to promotions and pay raises that allowed us to buy a lovely home. However, everything changed in 2008. The economic downturn hit hard, and contracts dried up. We were all forced to work longer hours for the same pay, and it was during this tumultuous period that I began to sense something was amiss in our marriage. The girls were in high school, and I was so absorbed in my work that I failed to notice Holly's affair with someone from our university, a betrayal that would shatter everything I believed about our life together. When I finally confronted Holly about my suspicions, she laughed it off, dismissing my concerns as unfounded. Yet, deep down, I knew she was lying. Despite the turmoil, I had managed to provide us with a comfortable home, as Holly had always insisted we live up to some arbitrary standard of success. Now, it was time to reclaim my life, beginning with this new job opportunity that promised to lift me out of the darkness and into a brighter future. A hard truth. Buying a beautiful 5-bedroom house in Southampton felt like a milestone. The market was favoring buyers at that time, so we managed to secure a great deal, even though the mortgage was a bit on the high side. The only unconventional step I took was opening a savings account solely in my name. I deposited my year-end bonus into it, and since I was the primary breadwinner managing all the finances, I doubted Holly would even notice. Looking back, that account turned out to be one of the smartest moves I ever made. I felt the need for a safety net because deep down, I was unsure if Holly might ever decide to leave me, especially if her old flame resurfaced. After that, life returned to a familiar rhythm. The girls were my top priority, and I made sure to encourage their academic pursuits while spending quality time with them on weekends. I took them to dance classes, concerts, and the zoo more times than I could count. Holly, on the other hand, seemed perpetually occupied with her coffee dates with her self-indulgent friends. I rarely socialized with the other husbands. We all seemed to exist in a hierarchy that felt both nepotistic and submissive. My friends would often tease me with the Rolling Stones song under my thumb, and I frequently found myself canceling plans to accommodate Holly's whims. But everything changed just a few months ago. Eva had just left for university, and for the first time in 18 years, it was just Holly and me. With both girls at their alma mater, I was unpacking Eva's things in the apartment she would share with her sister when she suddenly asked, "Dad, why are you even with Mom?" I was taken aback. Eva had always been the quiet one, and her directness shocked me. "Daddy, I heard she's been hanging around with Henry Walker at your company," she added, her eyes glistening with unspilled tears. This revelation hit hard. I hadn't been surprised by Holly's potential infidelity. I had simply chosen not to investigate for fear of disrupting our family. I didn't want my daughters to suffer or resent me, as my sisters had resented our father. I allowed myself to be deceived, convinced that ignorance was bliss. I still loved Holly, but I cherished the life we had built together even more. Ava's words revealed much about the girls' feelings toward their mother. They loved and respected me, but I knew they were disappointed that I hadn't taken a firmer stance against Holly's behavior. It also reminded me of the influences of women from my past and how they had contributed to my weaknesses. Most troubling of all, I realized that my colleagues openly mocked me, especially in reference to Henry Walker, who was, unbeknownst to me, the nephew of Jack, the company owner. I felt like a fool. I couldn't ignore the situation any longer, especially now that my youngest daughter had discovered Holly's betrayal. I steeled myself to confront her. My heart raced as I sat at the kitchen table, anxiously awaiting her return. When Holly finally walked through the door, she regarded me with an unsettling mix of apathy and disdain. She didn't speak as she put away her bags, and I finally broke the silence. "Are you having an affair, Holly?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. She turned to face me, a slight blush creeping onto her cheeks. "I wouldn't call it that, darling," she replied without hesitation. I was taken aback by her casual admission. "So, you're cheating on me?" I pressed, feeling an emotional storm brewing inside. "You're a wonderful person, Alex. You're a great provider and my best friend, but there are things you can't give me," she said bluntly. "And I'm not ashamed to say I want it all." I was incredulous. "You're cheating on me, and that's okay?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Only my body, Alex," she replied coolly. "My heart and mind belong to you." Her audacity left me speechless. I had never been so blindsided in my life. "I've never turned you down for sex, Alex. All I'm doing is exploring with a couple of young guys," she confessed. "What?" I shouted, struggling to process her words. My restrained anger seemed to catch her off guard as she walked around the table and took the seat across from me. "Don't yell at me, Alex," she said, regaining her composure. "I love you, but this is how it's going to be. Deal with it, or I'll leave you and be with them." I sat there, staring at her, grappling with the hurt and betrayal I felt. For a moment, I thought she might see the pain on my face, but instead, she continued with her justification. "Everyone does it these days, Alex. My girlfriends have affairs with younger men, and they say it makes for a better marriage," she stated, almost cheerfully. The absurdity of her rationale shocked me. I had difficulty absorbing the reality that Holly was trying to normalize her infidelity by pointing to other similar actions. "So, what? You're saying I can have another woman too?" I asked incredulously. She stared at me for a moment, then burst into laughter, as if the thought was utterly preposterous. I remained silent, feeling as if I was losing myself in this twisted conversation. Holly's laughter only deepened the chasm between us. "Yes, Alex, come on, be serious," she said dismissively. In that moment, I understood that I could no longer remain silent. I had to reclaim my dignity and stand up for what I believed in. I wouldn't let her minimize my pain or reduce our marriage to a casual affair. The time had come for me to confront the reality of our situation and decide what my next steps would be, both for myself and for my daughters. Trouble communicating, a life unraveled. It's a peculiar feeling to struggle with conversations, especially with women you've known for years. As I sat there, I couldn't help but think about the irony of my situation. My wife, Holly, was sitting across from me, and yet I felt as if I were speaking a different language. She mocked me, giggling as if my pain were just a joke. "You know, Alex," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "don't ruin a good thing. I'm still your wife, I still love you, and I still come home to you every night. So don't ruin your life over this, and don't do something you'll regret later." Her words hung heavy in the air, and I found myself sinking into a whirlpool of emotions. How could she be so dismissive? It was as if the very foundation of our life together had crumbled in an instant. She spoke so casually about her affairs, revealing a callousness that made my stomach churn. In that moment, I understood that she didn't care about me, about us. The realization was like a slap in the face. I felt angry, deeply angry. How could she do this? And how could I have been so blind? That night, I couldn't bear to sleep in the same bed as her. I retreated to the spare room, consumed by thoughts of betrayal and disbelief. Around midnight, Holly knocked on the door, her voice playful yet oddly sincere. "Why aren't you in bed, Alex?" she called. "Are you really that upset? Come on, get over it. This is how the world works now. You're acting like an old man." Her laughter echoed through the hallway, and I could sense her presence lingering outside my door. "Suit yourself, Alex," she said, her voice dripping with confidence. "You'll be back in bed soon. You never deny me anything, and we both know I'll get my way." The truth in her words was undeniable. Over the past 22 years, I had given her everything, my loyalty, my devotion, my willingness to go along with whatever she wanted. It was common knowledge that I was essentially on her payroll, but now it seemed that everyone knew I was also the butt of her jokes. Sleep eluded me that night, and I found myself wandering downstairs to watch TV. A show caught my attention, celebrities tracing their family trees. While I was initially uninterested, it sparked a memory of my own family, a tangled web I had long ignored. I had no contact with my mother or sisters, but memories of my father began to resurface. I remembered so little about him. Had he had a family of his own? Why had he left? My mother always claimed he had abandoned us, but my brother-in-law had informed me that my father had passed away years ago. My sisters denied knowing anything, and that was when I decided to sever ties with them entirely. The following day, I woke up early, determined to escape the suffocating atmosphere Holly created. Thoughts of our conversation swirled in my mind, and I desperately sought a distraction. I recalled the TV show and decided to delve deeper into my father's past. "Good morning, Alex," a familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see Henry Walker, his smug grin threatening to erupt into laughter at any moment. It made my blood boil. "How's your wife doing?" he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. A few men at the coffee machine joined in, their snickers a chorus of ridicule that only intensified my anger. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but instead, I just walked past them, feeling like a punchline in a cruel joke. As I entered my office, I glanced at my boss's secretary, Olivia. She looked at me with a mix of pity and amusement. "Can I offer you anything, Mr. Price?" she said, suppressing a giggle. "Maybe a couple of balls?" I blinked, stunned by her audacity. What had my life become? The day had barely begun, and already I felt like a laughingstock. I tried to focus on my project, but the anger bubbled beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. It was time to confront my past. All I knew was that my father was born in Cambridgeshire and had left us when I was just a child. I turned to genealogy websites, searching for clues about my father. After an hour of digging, I found 14 James Prices born around 1939 in Cambridgeshire. One of them might be my father, but I needed more information. I posted messages on various genealogy forums, hoping someone might respond. As I reflected on the last 24 hours, my boss, Jack, called me into his office. He was a wealthy man in his 60s, having been married 3 times. Jack was notorious for his bullying demeanor and affairs, including one with Olivia. "I've heard about your wife's antics, Alex," he said sharply. "And I want to make sure this doesn't affect the business." "Of course, Jack," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, I was fuming. He continued, "Family comes first for me, so if this becomes a problem, you're the one who will have to leave. Is that understood?" He treated me like a child being reprimanded by a teacher, and I bit my lip to suppress my anger. As I turned to leave, I caught Olivia's eye. Her laughter echoed in my ears as I walked past her, feeling smaller and smaller with every step. My life felt like a series of unfortunate events, and the weight of my situation pressed down on me. I had to figure out who I was, where I came from, and how to reclaim my dignity in a world that seemed determined to laugh at my expense. As the door clicked shut behind me, I could hear uproarious laughter that clearly referenced my departure. It was a familiar sound, one that tugged at my heart, reminding me just how out of place I felt at the office. Returning to my workspace, I realized that my presence there was no longer beneficial. I had invested heavily in my daughter's education, only to find myself funding my wife's betrayals instead. I considered myself a straightforward man. I appreciated my gadgets, but I could easily live without a sprawling house. Most of my expenses were dedicated to Holly's indulgences, weekly trips to the hair salon, manicures, her flashy car, and all the other unnecessary luxury she seemed to crave. Typically, I found solace in my work. It was a space where I could unleash my creativity, and I had built a solid reputation. Many of the parts produced and sold by the company were designed by me. I was confident I could find employment elsewhere if I needed to, but my colleagues seemed to think I was too soft, and perhaps they were right. I was not one to stir the pot. I preferred harmony over confrontation. I was simply Alex, the approachable engineer, someone easy to be around. Glancing at my computer screen, a family vacation photo flashed before me, reminding me of happier times. I clicked on my email, and to my surprise, a message awaited me from a woman named Jennifer Holmes from the Cambridge Genealogical Committee. My heart raced as I realized how swiftly they had responded to my inquiry. Jennifer had read my post about searching for information on my father and reached out to a woman named Rachel Murray, who claimed to be his niece. To my astonishment, Rachel was my cousin. I eagerly sent my phone number to Jennifer, hoping Rachel would reach out soon. Leaving the office, a sense of hope washed over me. Upon entering my home, the inviting aroma of dinner filled the air. I dropped my bag in the hallway and headed into the kitchen, where I found Holly engrossed in cooking. We exchanged a brief greeting, and then silence fell over us as we sat down to dinner. Holly attempted to engage me in conversation, but she quickly realized that I was still grappling with the anger from the night before. It was an unusual moment for me. Typically, I couldn't last long without giving in to her charms or allowing her to steer the conversation. "Can we talk about last night?" she asked, her voice soft. "What's there to discuss? You laid everything out perfectly last night." "I'll either accept it or I won't," I replied, my voice steady but firm. For a fleeting moment, regret flashed across her face, but it was gone just as quickly. She took a deep breath, clearing her throat before continuing. "You're a wonderful husband, and you've never turned me down for anything. Please don't turn me down now, Alex," she almost pleaded. It was a familiar tactic, her way of trying to manipulate the situation to her favor. "If I'm so great, why cheat on me? Why make a fool of me?" I pressed, searching her eyes for an answer. But all she did was brush me off, selfishness evident in her demeanor. My fatigue with her excuses mounted. I had been working tirelessly to provide for us, yet all I received in return was disrespect. Holly drove a sleek, new car while I was stuck with my 12-year-old Range Rover. "Listen, Alex, I have needs that you just can't fulfill. Either you can handle it, or you might as well hand me over to a younger man," she stated bluntly. "Are you talking about Henry Walker?" I interjected. "Everyone knows you've been sleeping with him." "Yes, Henry and I are lovers," she responded with a surprising calmness. "He's actually your boss, and one day he'll take over the company from his uncle. He's giving me what I need in bed right now, and if you don't agree to this, I'll leave you, and he'll provide me everything else I want and need." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor as I walked away in silence. The urge to lash out bubbled beneath the surface, but instead, I retreated to my office, feeling the weight of despair settle over me. I buried my head in my hands and screamed silently, tears threatening to spill. I wanted to be anywhere but here. As I collected myself, the phone rang, pulling me back to reality. An unfamiliar voice introduced herself as Rachel. We spoke for nearly an hour, and when I hung up, I felt as though a heavy cloud had lifted. A genuine smile broke across my face. Rachel was thrilled that I wanted to learn more about my father and had a wealth of information to share. She talked a mile a minute, and I struggled to keep up with the flood of details. I discovered that my mother had kicked my dad out of the house and had lied to me throughout my childhood. Tragically, he had passed away from alcohol poisoning when I was just 11 years old. My grandmother had always blamed my mother for his volatile temperament after he left. Rachel shared that my dad had yearned to reconnect with me but had been unable to do so. We planned to meet that weekend at her home in Cambridge. Excitement bubbled within me. I felt as if this reunion would be a much-needed escape from my troubled life. The week dragged on. Home life remained tense, while at work, I endured relentless ridicule. Henry and his cronies found amusement in taunting me, even going so far as to hang a pair of panties on my office door. Olivia, my coworker, didn't say a word, her silence speaking volumes. Attached to the panties was a note, "Please go back to your wife." I felt shattered, anger and humiliation crashing over me like a tidal wave. When Saturday finally arrived, I told Holly I was going to visit a friend in London. She didn't even bat an eye, which made it easier for me to leave without enduring her mocking tone. The drive to Cambridge was stressful, with the M25 highway living up to its notorious reputation, and I ended up arriving at Rachel's house an hour later than expected. But the warmth of her welcome made it all worthwhile. The best hug I had received in years enveloped me as Rachel introduced me to her husband, Greg, and their 2 young children, Grace and William. Once the formalities faded, we dove deep into discussions about my father and my newfound family. Rachel's personality radiated warmth, and it was clear she and Greg shared a deep connection, often completing each other's thoughts as they recounted stories from our family's past. During my visit, we were joined by David and Lucy, eager to include me in the unfolding narrative of my family's history. I felt a glimmer of hope for the future amid all the turmoil, realizing that perhaps, just perhaps, I could forge a new path for myself. Finding Freedom, the story of Alex and Holly. Alex stared at the late afternoon sun filtering through the curtains, its warmth juxtaposed with the chill in his heart. The day had been enlightening, filled with new connections and perspectives he had desperately needed. He had spent the afternoon with his cousin David, who was also Rachel's brother. The two had bonded quickly, sharing laughter and stories about family. David filled Alex in on their father and the intricacies of family dynamics, which had always felt like a foggy memory to him. After lunch, they decided to take a stroll, a quiet excursion that allowed Alex some much-needed space to think. David's insights, coupled with the unconditional support from his newfound cousins, brought a flicker of hope into Alex's life. For so long, he had felt suffocated by the lies and betrayals that surrounded him, and in that moment, he realized he had an entirely different family that had shown him more kindness in just one day than he had experienced in a lifetime. This fresh perspective ignited a determination within Alex. He needed to reclaim his happiness, not just for himself, but for his daughters, his friends, and now, this new family who had welcomed him with open arms. With a heart full of gratitude, he left Cambridge feeling renewed. However, upon returning home that evening, the warmth of hope quickly evaporated. It was 8 p.m., and his wife, Holly, was preparing to head out. "Where are you going?" he asked, a mix of concern and irritation in his voice. "I'm just going out with friends," she replied dismissively. "Friends? You mean Henry or Max?" he snapped back, caught off guard by his own intensity. Holly shot him a surprised look, her eyes wide with disbelief that he knew about her affairs. "Please don't do this again, Alex," she pleaded, her tone indifferent, as if his feelings were of no consequence. "Please, Holly. I'm asking you to stop this and be my wife," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Stop being silly, Alex. I'm your wife and always will be. Don't deny me my pleasures, and I'll make your life easier. I'll be back by midnight," she said, brushing off his concerns with a wave of her hand as she grabbed her designer purse and headed for the door. His heart sank. "Holly, as your husband, I'm asking you not to do this," he insisted, his voice harsher than he intended. She paused, looking at him with a mixture of disbelief and amusement, as if assessing who this man was and why he dared to challenge her. Then she laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that pierced him deeply. "What are you going to do, Alex? Leave me? You'd never have the courage to do that. We both know you'll always be by my side." Mortified, Alex felt his spirit deflate as her words echoed in his mind. He had always known she was spoiled, raised with little regard for others' feelings. He had treated her like a queen while he became the workhorse, sacrificing his own needs and desires for her whims. It was a bitter pill to swallow. He had been a fool for too long. Determined, he knew this had to end. He needed a plan, a way to extricate himself from this toxic relationship. The thought that had been swirling in his mind transformed into action. Even as she reveled in her escapades with her lovers, he knew he had to reclaim his dignity and his life. That night, he began sorting through his things, seeking out the box he had stashed away long ago. Inside, he found an old photograph of his mother and sisters. It had been a cherished memory, one that now felt tainted by Holly's presence in his life. Without a second thought, he cut out Holly's face from their wedding picture and pasted it beside the photograph of his mother and sisters. This was his way of severing the last remnants of attachment he felt toward her. He placed the altered picture on his desk, right next to his computer monitor, a daily reminder of the emotional distance he was trying to create. By the time it was nearly 1 a.m., he had made significant progress in formulating his escape plan. He had decided on a timeline. Maybe a few weeks would be enough for him to prepare. Holly remained blissfully unaware of his intentions, and that was just the way he needed it. As he considered his future, he was jolted back to reality by the sound of footsteps. He glanced out the window just in time to see Henry's car pulling away from their home. Holly was back, and he quickly erased the documents on his computer, not wanting her to catch on to his plans. He made himself a cup of coffee, trying to mask the turmoil inside him. When she entered the house, Alex felt the tension in the air thickening. They exchanged no words, but the silence spoke volumes. As he sat on the couch, his mind raced with thoughts of freedom and a life without her presence. Even without his daughters, he reassured himself that life would be bearable, perhaps even better. The next morning at work, Alex resolved that he wouldn't lift a finger for the company any longer. Jack Walker could fire him for all he cared. He walked to his office, ignoring the snide remarks and taunts that accompanied his every step. Fueled by anger and determination, he made an appointment with the bank for 1 p.m., hoping to close the chapter on his financial ties with Holly. The bank meeting went smoothly, and he was able to close their joint accounts, removing his name from any financial obligations they had shared. With a few $1,000s in cash from his ISA, he felt a sense of liberation washing over him. On his way back to the office, he stopped at an electronics store, purchasing 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 GB USB hard drive, and a new hard drive for his PC. Back at his desk, he began looking into the company's client files. He had seen them in Jack's office before and knew they existed, but he needed the password. Within an hour, he cracked the code. Ironically, it was Jack's wife's name as the username and Jack's name followed by his 6-digit birth date as the password. Now armed with this information, Alex felt more prepared than ever to take control of his life. The pieces were falling into place, and he was determined to break free from the chains that had bound him for so long. I plugged the disk into my computer, loading all the files onto it. In just 10 minutes, I repeated the process with my latest plans and designs for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system I had been developing, aimed at keeping our company ahead of the competition. We were innovating pumps for air conditioners, heavy machinery, and even the dairy industry. After ensuring everything was backed up, I erased all my computer history, wiping away every trace of my plans and designs. With that done, I powered down the machine, removed the old hard drive, and replaced it with a new one. I packed everything into my bag, reinstalled Windows, and spent the rest of the day researching our competitors on my phone. I logged onto job search sites, looking for engineering positions in the South London area, before finally leaving for the day. That evening, after yet another silent dinner, I retreated to my office. There, I discovered that one of our major competitors, Sudden Hydraulics, was seeking a mechanical engineer to help design and manage their shop, as they were experiencing financial difficulties. While it wasn't exactly my dream job, it was pretty close. They were offering a salary that was £10,000 less than what I was currently making, but I decided to send an email and attach my CV anyway. Later that night, I chose to sleep in our marital bed, hoping to avoid disturbing Holly. I made sure I was already asleep by the time she walked in. When I felt her rubbing against me, a wave of sickness hit my stomach, but as repulsive as it was, there was a strange comfort in feeling that way. I realized she was disgusted with me, and I figured that would be beneficial in the long run. The next day, I received a call from Robert Williams of Sudden Hydraulics. He was taken aback when I expressed interest in leaving Walker Engineering for his smaller firm. He offered me the job almost immediately, but I insisted on having an interview first, which he graciously accepted. It felt like another crucial step had been set into motion, and everything was beginning to fall into place. With plenty of free time, I started looking for apartments in the area. I didn't need a house, I just wanted a space of my own. After a bit of searching, I found a lovely 2-bedroom apartment for rent at £1,200 a month. It was ideally located, just 15 minutes from my daughter's and 5 minutes from my new workplace. I arranged to view it the day after my interview with Robert Williams. I called Jack to let him know I needed to meet the girls in Kingston to sign some papers, but he brushed me off, telling me I could go that night. Feeling frustrated but determined, I reached out to my best friend, Toby Brown. We had known each other since 6th grade. Toby had gone to Kingston as well, but he pursued finance and math. Now, he was a prominent banking analyst living with his wife and kids in a nice house in Twickenham. I knew Toby and his wife didn't care much for Holly, which made it awkward for us to socialize as couples. Holly was jealous of Sarah, Toby's wife, because Sarah was a successful web developer married to a wealthy banker. Despite everything I provided for her, I always felt like I fell short. I arranged to meet Toby the night after my interview and the apartment viewing. He sensed something was weighing on my mind, but I promised to fill him in when we met. As I drove to Kingston, I pondered everything that was happening. This day felt pivotal, not just for my immediate plans but also for my long-term future. Until recently, I had envisioned retiring at 55, investing in a villa in Italy or another picturesque location. My mortgage would be paid off by 50, giving me 5 extra years to build up savings without relying solely on a retirement fund. My new job was about 20 minutes away from the girls' apartment, and both the meeting and the apartment viewing went smoothly. I had ample time before meeting Toby, so I grabbed lunch for myself and the girls and headed over to their place. They lived together, and I was covering half their rent. As I approached their apartment, a rush of uncertainty hit me. I wasn't sure how to break the news to them, especially since I didn't know how often they discussed their mother with each other. I wanted to be honest and not hide anything from them. When they saw me, they ran up and hugged me tightly, their faces lighting up with joy. "Daddy! Daddy!" they shouted, laughter spilling from their lips as if they were still little girls. My heart swelled with pride as I stepped inside, and I laid out the lunch I had brought. As we sat together, they animatedly shared stories about their lives and schoolwork. I felt immense pride for my daughters. Sophie had already completed 2 years of pharmacology, and Ava was studying nursing. These were professions that required love and compassion, and I admired their dedication. We chatted at length about our new family dynamics, promising that we would all get together soon. Once lunch was finished, I took a sip of coffee, and I could sense they were aware that something significant was happening. "What is it, Daddy?" "Spill it," Sophie urged. I took a deep breath. "Well, you know your mom cheated on me, right?" I said cautiously. They exchanged glances before nodding in unison. "I've had enough of this situation, and I've decided to leave her," I confessed. "About time, Daddy," Ava said, smiling brightly. "Yeah, seriously," Sophie added, her tone surprisingly fierce. "Are you too mad or anything?" I asked tentatively. "No, Daddy," Sophie said, her voice firm. "For as long as I can remember, she's been awful to you." I considered reprimanding her for disrespecting her mother, but honestly, I felt a sense of relief. They had clearly witnessed the strain in our family, and I hoped they wouldn't repeat their mother's mistakes in future relationships. I worried about how my actions might have impacted them. I never wanted to be the reason they felt weak or hurt. "What are you going to do now, Daddy?" Ava inquired, looking genuinely curious. I explained that I had secured a new job and would be moving closer to them. Their faces lit up with excitement, and they hugged me tightly, showering me with love and support. It was a small moment of victory in a sea of chaos, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was ready to embrace the future, one step at a time. Title: A New Dawn, Alex's Journey to Freedom. As I stood up to leave Toby and Sarah's apartment, I felt a surge of relief wash over me. I had just shared my plans with them, explaining that I would do everything in my power to safeguard my financial future. They promised to support me, regardless of the circumstances. Their loyalty brought a warmth to my heart, reminding me that, despite their love for their mother, their allegiance lay with me. That moment marked the beginning of the most critical phase of my plan, and I was ready to embrace it. Toby and Sarah met a few years after he graduated from university. They are two of the kindest people I know, and tonight, I would be relying on their goodwill more than ever. As I walked in, they greeted me with their usual warmth, but I could see the concern etched on their faces. They sensed the weight of what I was about to ask. With no time for pleasantries, I cut to the chase, divulging everything that had transpired thus far. To my surprise, they were more taken aback by my resilience than by Holly's infidelity, which they regarded as a familiar story. "Why did you decide to leave her now?" Alex asked, handing me another cup of tea. I declined, opting for something stronger since I had to drive home later. I always had my suspicions that she was cheating on me, but I never had the proof. Now that she's admitted it, everything just clicks into place. And there was something else that pushed me over the edge, I confessed, recounting the discovery about my father's past and my mother's betrayal. "Is this what prompted you to finally stand up for yourself?" Toby asked, his worry apparent. I hesitated but knew I had to share my truth. I visited my father's grave. At first, I was hesitant, but I laid flowers and whispered a few words. Then I glanced at the gravestone, and I was hit with a shocking realization. "What was it?" they asked in unison. It had a rose engraved on it, along with an inscription that read, "In memory of him," followed by his birth date and the age at which he died. He passed at 44, the very age I am now. Toby and Sarah recoiled slightly, their expressions shifting from concern to understanding. They realized that, like my father, I had reached a crossroads. I could either succumb to the pressures and become self-destructive or rise above the chaos. "I won't let myself die like he did, trying to be the perfect husband while being ridiculed and bullied," I declared, feeling stronger with each word. Admitting my struggles to my friends was daunting, but it was a necessary step in reclaiming my life. "What do you need from us, Alex?" Toby asked, his voice steady. "Please say no if it's too much," he added, as Sarah's fierce determination flickered in her eyes. "I have a plan to protect myself and gain the upper hand," I said, feeling a sense of empowerment surge within me. Back in 2008, I opened a separate savings account and stashed all my bonuses and spare cash away. I was fortunate that the only way to secure a mortgage for our home was to apply solely in my name, since Holly lacked a consistent employment history. With a sense of urgency, I revealed the numbers. My savings, with interest, are now worth £60,800, but I still owe £120,000 on the mortgage. The house down the street sold for over $500,000, and I need you, Toby, and your connections, to help me secure a short-term loan for the remaining £60,000. I want to pay off the mortgage before I file for divorce. Toby raised an eyebrow. "Why bother? You know she'll fight for half," right? Unless we count the savings I'm keeping, I countered. She can still fight for half of everything, but that's where you come in. I want you to help me incorporate a new company. I plan to transfer ownership of my house to that company. This way, she won't have any claim to it. Toby and Sarah exchanged glances, processing my proposal. Will that actually work? Toby asked. I mean, if you divorce her, she'll hire a lawyer and go after everything. She doesn't have the funds for it, I replied confidently. And I doubt her parents will want to foot a hefty legal bill once they learn she's been unfaithful. I plan to leverage her perception of me to my advantage. She thinks I'm a coward who will never leave her. I won't ask for a divorce until I've sold the house. The property will convert to cash, and by the time she realizes what's happening, we can move the funds into different accounts. Toby chuckled, admiration in his voice. I never knew you had it in you, Alex. So, you want our help? Absolutely. I'm counting on you, I affirmed. Just remember, a good lawyer will try to trace the money, Toby warned. I know, I replied. But it'll take time, and she won't be able to afford a big legal bill. After another hour of conversation, I felt a renewed sense of purpose as I headed home. As I drove, the pieces of my plan began to align, and a sense of optimism took hold. I decided I wouldn't even file for divorce immediately. I knew I wouldn't find anyone else to share my life with, nor did I plan to remarry, which would grant me the time to execute my strategy. I imagined that Holly wouldn't even notice my absence for at least a month. At that thought, I chuckled to myself, feeling a mix of excitement and relief. When I finally arrived home, it was nearly 2 a.m. I glanced into the bedroom, where Holly lay sound asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing in our lives. No guilt weighed on my conscience as I made my way to the spare room. Thursday morning arrived, and I was out of the house before Holly even stirred. With a steady hand, I penned my resignation letter, feeling like a man on the verge of reclaiming his destiny. This was only the beginning. With Toby and Sarah by my side, I felt empowered to confront the challenges ahead and seize control of my life, inching closer to the freedom I so desperately craved. Around lunchtime, I picked up my phone and called Toby. I've got some good news, some bad news, and then more good news, I said, trying to keep the mood light. All right, let's hear it in that order, he replied, sounding curious. I started with the good news. I officially registered the company. It took less than an hour at the company house. That's great. Now, what's the bad news? He asked, his tone shifting slightly. To secure the loan we need, I'll have to put up some serious collateral, like a house. And, well, I don't think that's going to work for me, I admitted, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me as I scratched my head and thought. Toby paused for a moment before continuing. Listen, Alex, you trust me, and I trust you. I've been discussing this with Sarah, and we think we have a solution. I'll transfer £60,000 into your account right now so you can get started. Just pay me back when you can. I was stunned into silence. If he could see my expression, he'd understand just how grateful I was. Toby, this is too much. You've already done so much for me. Just take the money, man. Go do what you need to do. You have no idea how much this helps me. I owe you a massive debt of gratitude. Just walk away from that disrespectful, money-grabbing scammer and focus on being happy, that's all that matters to us, he said with genuine concern. I provided him with my details and hung up, still reeling from the weight of his generosity. My next call was to the bank to set up a meeting for the next day after work, or whatever was left of it. With my mind racing, I drove over to the local Land Rover dealership. I had a connection there since I bought Holly's Range Rover Sport about 10 months ago, and I was still paying for it. An idea sparked in my mind for how to free up some cash. Hey, Mr. Price. Have you finally decided on a new car? John Reeves greeted me at the entrance. No, John. I actually wanted to talk about selling my wife's car and clearing my debt, I said, trying to suppress my satisfaction. Is everything alright? He asked, concern etched on his face. If you consider my wife demanding and now wanting a Mercedes 4x4, then no, not really, I replied with a slight chuckle. I had seen Holly transform into someone I barely recognized, a spoiled princess who would throw tantrums if she didn't get her way. I can't say I'm surprised, he admitted. We reached an agreement, he would take the Range Rover back, and we would cancel the payment plan. I promised to return for an upgrade once things settled down. The thought of him selling the car as practically new soothed my mind. On my way out, I picked up a brochure for the 2016 models, not for me, but for Holly. When I got home, I found her sitting in the living room, sipping coffee and looking a bit pale. I tossed my jacket aside and dropped my bag on the floor. Everything okay, love? I asked, trying to keep my tone light, though I was grinding my teeth a little. Yeah, just a little tired, honey, she replied, taking a sip from her mug. She stretched out her arms, expecting a hug. I ignored her gesture and reached into my bag, pulling out the brochure. I know this will make you feel better, I said, walking over and sitting down on the coffee table across from her. She raised an eyebrow, glancing at the empty seat next to her, then back at me. What do you have there? She asked, curiosity piqued as she eyed the brochure. Your car is almost a year old, and I saw the new model at the dealership today. It's awesome, I said, watching her eyes light up. I want my wife to have the best, so I'm going to trade in your car and buy you this one. I pointed to the sleek 2017 model featured in the brochure. Oh, I love that, she exclaimed, completely bypassing the core of my plan. You always know how to make me feel better, don't you, Alex? The only problem is they already have a buyer for your car, so I need to get it there by Friday afternoon. I'll finish work early and drive it to the dealership. You can just use mine this weekend to visit your family, I explained, watching her expression shift from joy to shock. Wait, what's wrong? She asked, bewildered. I just thought you were still upset about our arrangement. It wasn't our arrangement, Holly. It was yours. I didn't have a say in it. But I guess I don't really have a choice, do I? I said, hoping for some acknowledgement, but she just nodded as if she had put me in my place. I felt the weight of defeat settle on my shoulders. I love you, Alex, she said, her eyes filled with a sincere concern that made me want to believe her, even if I knew better. I didn't respond, I just turned and walked away into the kitchen. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts, and I stepped outside into the garden to answer it. It was Toby confirming that the money had been transferred. I was ready to take the plunge. The next day, I wasted no time. I walked into the bank and found myself sitting in front of a mortgage loan officer. She looked to be around my age, and I couldn't help but wonder if there might be a life after Holly, though I quickly pushed the thought aside. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off, and I had closed all my remaining accounts. I scoured listings for houses and opened a new account at a different bank. The relief of knowing I wouldn't have to pay anything else unless Holly hired a lawyer was liberating, but as I left the bank, my smile faded. I returned to the office, ignoring Olivia as she stood up to speak. I sat down with a cup of coffee, contemplating the next stage of my plan. I reached out to the land registry and filled out the necessary online application form. I had all the details of Toby and Sarah's new company ready, and within 10 minutes of submitting the application, I received a confirmation email stating it would take 3 to 5 days to process. After that, I would simply hand the paperwork over to Toby, and he could register the property in his company's name. I spent some time browsing the internet for furniture and details on how to cancel utilities in the house. I needed to wait for the right moment, but I also began setting up new accounts for my future apartment. There was just one more thing left to do, something I had been putting off. I knocked on Jack's door, and of course, Olivia was there with him, her presence only serving to remind me of my disdain for their secretive affair. As she left us alone, Jack greeted me cheerfully, clearly unaware of the storm brewing within me. "What can I do to help, Alex?" he asked, escorting Olivia out of the room with a glance. I placed my resignation letter on his desk, knowing this was the first step towards reclaiming my life. Jack's silly grin faded as he realized what I was doing, but it felt good to take control for once. The unexpected turn of events, a new chapter in Alex's life. With a sly grin on his face, Jack leaned back in his chair and asked, "What's going on, Alex?" I took a deep breath, my resolve solidifying. "I've resigned," I replied firmly. "Given the current situation with our families, I think it's best if I leave immediately." Jack looked dumbfounded, as if I had just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. "But you can't do that. We need you," he exclaimed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Not as much as you need your nephew," I shot back, the bitterness lacing my words. "I'll be back on Monday to pick up the last of his things." As I feigned dropping a pen from my pocket, I discreetly retrieved a digital voice recorder hidden in my sock. I managed to attach it to the underside of his desk, pressing the record button before sliding it back into place. "If that's all, Jack, I have things to take care of," I said, turning to leave. "Okay, Alex, but don't come crawling back when you're out of money," he called after me, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your wealth is the only thing keeping your cheating wife with you, you know." "Of course I know that, Jack. I only wish my wife were as loyal as yours," I replied with a sly smile, knowing I'd hit a nerve. I turned on my heel and walked out of his office, feeling a sense of liberation. An hour later, I drove home, my heart racing with anticipation and anxiety. I picked up Holly's car and her magazine, then headed to the dealership to drop off her vehicle. Thankfully, John Reeves was there and offered me a ride home, which I gratefully accepted. When I arrived home that evening, I found Holly sitting at the kitchen table, dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she had been crying. "What's going on, H?" I asked, trying to sound genuinely concerned. "We need to talk, Alex," she gestured for me to sit down. A wave of dread washed over me. What could this possibly be about? "I went to the doctor today," she began hesitantly. My heart raced as I tried to process her words. If this was serious, what kind of man would I be if I left a sick woman? I have a diagnosis," she finally admitted, bursting into tears. "I couldn't help it," I laughed. It caught her off guard. "What's so funny?" she asked, confused and hurt. "I know I don't have anything because I haven't touched you in over a month. And when I found out about your adventures, I used protection," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, so everything's fine with you then?" she shot back, her voice filled with bitterness. I shrugged. "Just take your medication, and soon you'll be back on your feet," I said, walking away as she continued to cry at the table. That night, I experienced my first good night's sleep in months, even though I crashed in the spare room. I wasn't about to take any chances with a wife who might be contagious. On Saturday morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. I decided to check on Holly. I tiptoed into our bedroom and gently woke her. "I'm going to take the girls out. Get some rest, okay?" She smiled at me, but as I turned to leave, I felt a pang of guilt. "You think I'm disgusting, don't you?" she asked, her voice trembling. I remained silent, and suddenly, tears streamed down her cheeks. "I just want you to feel better, that's all," she cried. "Oh Alex, I love you so much. I think I messed up big time," she confessed. I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions. I had just shared my medical scare with Alice, and she was horrified. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy for Holly, but it vanished as quickly as it had come. Without saying another word, I left the room, climbed into my car, and drove away, feeling lighter than I had in years. Later that morning, I sat down with the girls and shared everything that had happened. They were amazed and listened intently. I could see a newfound respect in their eyes, and it made me feel empowered. I recounted the little trip to the doctor, which they found hilarious, and in that moment, I realized they might harbor the same feelings of disdain for Holly as I did. "What's going to happen now, Daddy?" Ava asked, her brow furrowed in concern. "She'll have to move in with her parents or convince one of her lovers to take her in," I said, a smirk creeping onto my face. I doubt those two degenerates would want a real relationship with her. They seem only interested in bragging about their conquests. The girls nodded in agreement, exchanging knowing glances. That evening, I went to Toby and Sarah's for a dinner party, filled with their friends and coworkers. Several single women caught my eye, and with a little liquid courage, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Amy, who happened to be a divorced friend of Sarah's. As the drinks flowed, Amy encouraged me to dance, and I found myself enjoying the night more than I had in a long time. It was a welcome distraction from the chaos surrounding my marriage. When I got home late Sunday morning, I found Holly bustling around the house. As soon as she saw me, she rushed over and hugged me tightly. I patted her back awkwardly. "Where were you last night, Alex?" "I thought you were coming home," she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Toby and Sarah had a dinner party, and I had too much to drink, so I crashed on their couch," I replied nonchalantly, trying to keep my tone casual. "That's not like you. Did you have fun?" she asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I pulled out my phone and showed her pictures from the night. Her expression darkened as she saw a photo of me and Amy dancing. "Who is that woman?" she demanded, her tone sharp. "Oh, this is Amy. She's Sarah's friend. She made me dance, it was a blast," I said, trying to sound carefree. Holly's face turned crimson with anger. The irony of her being upset with me didn't escape my notice. She was furious that I had danced with someone while she had been cheating on me. In that moment, I felt a surge of empowerment. I was ready to reclaim my life, one dance step at a time. A turning point in Alex's life. "I want to go with you next time," Holly said, her mood lifting as she returned to her usual self. "I haven't seen the guys in a while." I nodded, moving to the kitchen to put the kettle on. Holly followed closely behind, her presence palpable. "Did you feel okay without the car?" I attempted to fill the silence with small talk, hoping to ease the tension that had settled between us. "I'm doing fine," she replied, though there was a hint of something in her tone. "When is my new car coming?" "They said it would be delivered on Wednesday." I turned to see a flicker of concern in her eyes. "But if you want, you can pick it up on Monday afternoon. I'll drive you." "I have things to do on Monday," she responded, brushing off my offer. "I'm getting my hair done and going shopping with my sister." I shrugged, trying to hide my disappointment. "I can drop you off in town to meet her, and then you can have her drive you to the dealership. You'll be able to come back in your new Range Rover." I couldn't help but smile at the thought. She stepped closer, arms wide open for a hug, but I turned back to the kettle, pretending to be preoccupied. The rest of the day was filled with an awkward tension. Holly kept trying to kiss me or hug me, and I made excuse after excuse to escape her embrace. By the time night fell, I could see the tears brimming in her eyes. "Good night, Holly," I said, trying to keep my tone light, but my heart felt heavy. "Will you sleep with me tonight, Alex? I want to snuggle up to you, and I want you to tell me everything's going to be okay," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I can't. Not until you get permission from Dr. Smith," I replied stiffly. "You've made your own bed." "Well, when I get better, I'm sure I can find a man who wants to get into bed with me. I still have a lot of lost time to make up for," she snapped, bitterness dripping from her words. I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of it all. It had taken longer than expected, but here she was, back to her usual self, with no regrets about what happened on Friday night. In the past, I would have fallen for her tears, but this time, I ignored them and headed for the spare room. It was time for me to reclaim my space, and she would be the one in the spare room. I felt a sense of relief wash over me as she spoke those words. Any lingering doubt I might have had evaporated. I glanced at a photo of her with my sisters, and all I felt was anger. She was nice only when she wanted something, and when she couldn't have it, she resorted to manipulation. The morning after. Monday morning came too soon. I woke up early, and so did Holly, who had a hair appointment at 8:30. I drove her into town as planned, the car ride steeped in silence. "Don't forget to take a cab to the dealership around 2 this afternoon. They're expecting you," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral as I ignored her attempts to lean in for a kiss. As I drove off, I couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the last time I saw her. I hoped it would be. On the way out, I called the cell phone company and canceled both of our contracts. Pulling over to the side of the road, I paid the fine on my card and was informed that our phones would be functional until 5 p.m. Great. With a renewed sense of purpose, I headed to the office to collect my P45. When I entered the factory, the atmosphere was somber. The news of my departure must have spread like wildfire, and for a brief moment, I saw fear flicker across the faces of my coworkers. As I walked down the hallway toward my office, I passed the coffee machine where the usual crowd had gathered. Max and Henry were there, exchanging jokes and smirks, oblivious to the turmoil in my life. "Good morning, guys," I said cheerfully, though my heart wasn't in it. "Good morning, Alex. How's the wife?" They chimed in with laughter that felt like daggers. "Not very well, I'm afraid. One of you underdogs has swiped it," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. I turned to leave, and their laughter died as I walked away. When I reached the stairs, Olivia saw me coming and half smiled, lowering her head as if finally recognizing my pain. But that respect I thought I had earned was fleeting. A showdown in the office. Jack was waiting for me at his office door before I could knock. "I have what you need, so take it and get out," he said curtly, dismissing me like a wayward child. Entering his office, I discreetly tucked a recorder into my pocket, knowing he had laid out his usual Friday night tales for Olivia. This time, I had evidence of his unprofessional behavior. "You have another job, Alex," he snapped, but my mind was elsewhere. "No, I don't," I replied, a wide grin breaking out on my face. He probably thought I would come crawling back to him soon. "So do I get my last month's paycheck and my year-end bonus?" I asked, feigning nonchalance. He burst into laughter, and just then, Olivia walked in with my P45. "What's so funny?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Alex just asked for his bonus and salary to be handed over." "That's hilarious," Jack exclaimed, and soon Olivia joined in. I decided to throw caution to the wind. "Why not join the fun?" I laughed, my laughter breaking the tension in the room. They paused, surprised. "Why are you laughing, Alex?" Olivia asked, her tone turning defensive. "I don't know, Olivia. Why do you let that old bastard have sex with you every week?" I shot back, laughter bubbling up inside me. Their faces froze, and Jack's face turned crimson with rage. "Get out of my office, and out of my company before I have the guys drag you out by your ears," he yelled. I walked out, still chuckling, the sound echoing in my ears as I made my way to my office to pack up the last of my belongings. Packing up my life. When I pulled up in front of my house, I got out of the car and lowered the back seats. Walking into the house, I pondered what I wanted to take with me. I had several Romero burritos tucked away, and I took them down, wrapping them in plastic I found in the garage. After packing them in the car, I roamed the house, gathering what little was left of my life with Holly. Finally, I climbed upstairs to empty out my closet. I pulled all of my important documents out of the safe, including the girls' birth certificates and our marriage license. As I searched for more things to take, I noticed an attic ladder and decided to see what was hidden up there. Climbing up, I was filled with a mix of nostalgia and regret. My life was about to change drastically, but in that moment, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. No longer would I be bound by the toxic ties of a broken relationship. I was ready to reclaim my life and chart my own path forward. As I climbed the stairs, nostalgia washed over me. There, surrounded by remnants of my past, were my old belongings, my diploma, family photos, and all the memories that came with them. I took a moment to reminisce before making my way to the handyman's workshop. It was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I carefully gathered all the jewelry I had purchased for Holly over the years, pieces that must have totaled over $10,000. Then, I turned my attention to the closet filled with her handbags, shoes, and expensive coats. Each item was a reminder of her lavish tastes, and as I pulled them out, it struck me how the entire closet had been funded by my hard work. I meticulously packed everything away, knowing I had receipts for almost all of it, a smart move for when I sold these items later on. As I packed, I realized I would need some entertainment in my new life, so I decided to grab the TV along with my cherished movie collection and Blu-ray player. By the time I finished loading the car, it was bursting at the seams. I could have sacrificed Holly's clothes, but something told me I should keep only her underwear. No sense in mixing up my emotions with unwanted sentiments. After securing everything, I strolled into the kitchen, making myself a cup of tea. I paused to enjoy the moment of calm before the storm. It felt good to take a breath. I called the telecom company to cancel the satellite TV, phone, and internet. Then I reached out to the utilities to disconnect British Gas and Southern Water. It would take a few days to process, but I couldn't have cared less. I was ready for a fresh start. Sitting on the edge of our bed, I glanced around, taking in the remnants of our life together. My eyes fell on an old dusty box at the top of the closet. It was Holly's wedding dress. She had cherished the dress more than I ever had, and a pang of sadness hit me as I pulled it out. Next to it was our wedding album, filled with pictures of happier times. With a heavy heart, I gathered up my things, walked out into the garden, and made a sizable pile of everything I was leaving behind, including Holly's clothes that I knew I couldn't sell. As I locked the car doors, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. I glanced at my watch. It was just 1:45 p.m. I decided to call Robert Williams to let him know I would drop off my P45 later that evening, along with my resignation. He seemed thrilled, and I filled him in on my plans to acquire new clients and improve the hydraulic pumps at work. I sensed his excitement as I hung up, hoping I had made his day. With time still on my hands, I found some paint thinner in the garage and headed back to the garden. The wedding dress lay in front of me, a symbol of everything I was leaving behind. Just as I was about to light the fire, my phone rang. "Hello?" I answered, my voice steady. "Alex. What's going on?" Holly's frantic voice blasted through the line. "What do you mean?" I replied, feigning ignorance. "Don't play dumb, Alex," she shot back. I tried to stay calm, but my heart raced. "If you need a car, you can pay for it yourself now," I stated, my voice steady but cold. "What are you talking about?" she asked, bewildered. "You heard me perfectly. If you want it, buy it." "I need to clean up the kitchen now," I replied, dismissively. Her confusion deepened. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" "No joke, Holly. I'm done with this." She was silent for a moment, and I could hear her breathing heavily, the tension palpable. "Alex, we'll talk when I get home," she finally said, her tone a mix of panic and anger. I didn't respond. I hung up the phone as she continued to call my name, her voice fading into the background. Outside, I struck a match and lit the fire, watching as the flames danced and consumed the fabric of our past. As I walked away, I pulled out our marriage certificate, tore it into pieces, and left it on the kitchen table alongside the only picture of us on vacation at Disneyland, an echo of happier times. Driving away, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. In the rearview mirror, I saw Holly and her sister Jennifer pull up to the house. Neither of them glanced my way, they simply rushed inside, likely unaware of what was happening. I turned off my phone, smiling as I pulled away, feeling the weight of the past lifting off my shoulders. As I drove towards my new home, the A3 was nearly deserted, yet I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gripping my chest. I knew this wasn't the last time I would see Holly. Once my plans unfolded, she would stop at nothing to track me down and make me pay for what I was doing. That was just who she was. I also worried about the girls getting involved. They were innocent in all this, and I wanted them to focus on their studies without our issues weighing them down. By 4 p.m., I arrived in town and decided it was time to visit a local phone store to set up a new cell phone contract. Afterward, I caught up with the administration team at work, processing my P45 and meeting Freya, the new receptionist. She was young and vibrant, bringing a refreshing energy to the office. As I settled into this new chapter, I felt a sense of hope stirring within me, eager for the future and what it might bring. Maintaining a professional demeanor was essential, especially when compared to Olivia's more relaxed approach. Once I returned to my new apartment, I was struck by how empty it felt. While I had running water and electricity, the place was devoid of any furnishings. I located the kettle I had brought from home, boiled some water, and made myself a cup of tea. As I settled in, I ordered a pizza to fill the void of my new beginnings. Feeling nostalgic, I picked up my old cell phone and powered it on, only to realize that the connection was cut. A sense of satisfaction washed over me knowing that Holly was also without her phone, which would give the girls a much-needed break from their mother's relentless calls. Within a week, I managed to furnish the apartment. With no time to waste, I reached out to Walker Engineering's clients, persuading them to switch to Sutton Engineering. Many of them were unhappy with Jack and his lack of integrity, and they quickly jumped ship to my side. Although a few remained loyal to him due to the superior products we offered, I knew Jack wouldn't grasp the full impact of losing customers until it was far too late. Meanwhile, I felt a sense of relief knowing that my old house had utility services cut off. Holly would soon realize that I wasn't returning. I understood she couldn't afford to pay the bills on her own, which meant that Toby could safely initiate the selling process. Sarah was eager to take on this task, and by the end of the week, the for sale signs were up. Just as I was settling into my new routine, Ava reached out to me. Apparently, Holly had moved back in with her parents, who were not pleased to discover that their daughter had strayed into infidelity. Naturally, Holly was furious about my actions, but strangely, I found a sense of satisfaction in her discontent. However, I knew this was just the beginning of my journey. By the weekend, I was invited to another dinner party at Toby and Sarah's place. I learned that Amy, a woman who had shown interest in me, would be there. Sarah mentioned that Amy had gone through a divorce a few years back and had remained single since her husband left her just prior to their divorce. Surprisingly, she had gained full custody of their children and financial support, which was a relief for her. However, it appeared that the divorce had made her cautious about men. After hearing about my situation, she expressed a desire to meet me, which led to this dinner invitation. Amy was 2 years younger than I was and had 2 teenage children, and I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension about this potential setup. Nevertheless, I figured it couldn't hurt to meet her. The evening was a success. I felt completely relaxed for the first time since contemplating my escape from Holly. Amy was understanding and didn't pressure me, creating an atmosphere that allowed me to unwind. We shared drinks, danced, and exchanged numbers at the end of the night. She offered me her support and asked me to reach out if I needed someone to talk to, which I appreciated. That night, I stayed in the spare room at Toby's house. However, the hangover I woke up with on Sunday morning was intense, and coffee didn't do much to alleviate it. Yet, as the day unfolded, I received fantastic news. Just 1 week after putting my house up for sale, I had 2 serious offers. One of them was too good to pass up, and I immediately accepted it for £550,000. While I knew the sale process might take some time, I agreed to the offer, envisioning how I would handle the proceeds. As soon as the money came through, I planned to open an ISA in my daughter's names and asked Toby to help distribute the remaining funds into various investment accounts. I would also return a portion of the money to him while keeping some cash in a home safe, just to be on the safe side. Another week passed, and Toby informed me that the sale could be finalized soon. I contacted the moving company to vacate my old house, and my daughters called Holly to check if she needed anything. Her response was angry and filled with threats. I reassured the girls that this situation would soon come to an end. On Tuesday morning, during a conversation with one of our new clients, I learned that he had met with Jack Walker regarding a possible supply contract extension. He informed me that Jack was not surprised to hear about the client's transition to Sutton Engineering. Apparently, Walker Engineering had to cut 50% of their staff due to recent job losses. To add to Jack's misfortune, I learned that Mrs. Walker was divorcing him for adultery. This news brought me no sympathy as I mentally calculated my upcoming commission checks. As the week continued, I received a reward for my hard work, a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSSE. Robert and the higher-ups were pleased with my performance and the company's progress, and they generously gifted me the car along with a few thousand in commission, totaling over £300. I found myself gazing out of my office window, admiring my new vehicle, when a familiar Ford Focus pulled into the parking lot. My heart sank as I recognized it. It was Holly's mother, Diana's car. I leaned back in my chair, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. Moments later, the phone rang. It was Freya, my secretary. "Mr. Price, there's a woman in the waiting room who claims to be your wife," she said. "Tell her I have a meeting and I'll be down in an hour," I replied, knowing that I needed to buy some time. Hours passed, and when I glanced out the window, I saw her still sitting there. Exhaling heavily, I decided to leave for the night. I figured if she saw me, I would have to face her. If not, I could simply drive past, hoping she wouldn't recognize my car. As I walked out of the side door, heading toward my new vehicle, I heard tires screeching. Before I could react, Holly had pulled up and blocked my way, jumping out of her car and storming toward me with a furious expression. The moment I saw her, it was like a storm had rolled in. Holly looked utterly disheveled. She was wearing clothes that were clearly her sister's hand-me-downs, and her hair looked like it hadn't seen a brush in weeks. As she stormed toward me, her eyes ablaze with anger, she screamed, "You bastard!" and threw a slap in my direction, though she missed entirely. "I hate you! I hate you!" she shouted, her voice echoing with raw emotion. "Yeah, I hate you too, Holly," I retorted, struggling to maintain my composure. "Now say what you want to say and then get out of my life." Tears streamed down her cheeks, painting a portrait of despair as she looked at me. "You ruined my life, you bastard," she whispered, her voice laced with bitterness. I stayed silent, letting her words wash over me. This was all too familiar, it always seemed to be about her. "You destroyed all my belongings, my wedding dress, my clothes," she continued, her voice rising. "And then you cancel everything and force me to move in with Mom and Dad." She stared at me, waiting for a response, but I was at a loss for words. "Is that all, Holly? Haven't you got anything to say for yourself?" I finally asked, my patience wearing thin. She paused, as if contemplating her next move, and I gestured for her to get into my car. She was taken aback but complied, clearly eager to escape the scrutiny of the public. Once inside, I couldn't help but notice how she had aged. The stress and the consequences of her actions had taken their toll on her appearance. "Please come home, Alex. We can put all this behind us. I forgive you," she pleaded, her eyes wide with desperation. "Wait, what?" I replied, incredulous. Did I hear you correctly? You forgive me? Yes, Alex, I will forgive you for ruining my life, Holly affirmed, but I couldn't believe my ears. You cheat on me openly, disrespect me after I gave you everything, and you have the audacity to say you forgive me? You're only thinking about yourself, Holly. I will never be with you again. So go away and be with one of your lovers. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, the tension palpable. It was clear that once the truth about her infidelity came to light, her so-called lovers didn't want anything to do with her anymore. Now I'm being treated differently by my friends, she lamented, her tone shifting from anger to regret. They think I'm a bad influence, and now some of the factory employees are losing their jobs because of me. That's my fault too. As much as I wanted to feel anger toward her, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. She had made her choices and was now paying the price. You had a beautiful life, Holly, and you ruined it out of greed and disrespect, I said, my voice firm yet tinged with a hint of sadness. But I have to move on with my life. I have nothing left, Alex. I need you. I want you back in my life, she cried, desperation evident in her voice. I have no money, no job. When will I get my share of the house? You've never once told me you love me. You just need me, and I don't need you, I stated flatly. As for the house, I didn't pay the mortgage, and I lost it. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and her jaw dropped. You can't be serious. I am. I want a divorce, I declared, feeling a mix of relief and dread. No, please, Alex. I love you. We've been together for over 20 years. I made a mistake. She pleaded, her voice rising in panic. A very big, unforgivable mistake, Holly. And I'm never coming home to you, I said resolutely. Please, Alex, she shouted, her voice echoing in the confined space of the car. I need a clean break. If you agree to the divorce, I'll give you £300 in cash, I offered, my tone steady. Her expression shifted as the tears were replaced by a newfound determination. No. I will fight you in court for everything. You can't let me lose the house. You're too smart for that. Damn it, she was right, and suddenly I felt cornered. Fine, Holly, let me be clear, you're never going to get a penny from me, I replied, my voice cold. She leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing. I'll fight you for everything, Alex. You don't have any money, and I can move my assets around so much that you'll end up spending a fortune trying to find it. I'm smart. By the time your lawyer finds it, you'll have racked up a bill that will negate any benefit. I suggest you take the money I'm offering or I'll give it away too. It's up to you, I said firmly, keeping my gaze locked on hers. You bastard. I loved you. I bore your children, and this is how you treat me. She shouted, fury radiating from her. Thanks to me, our daughters will grow up to be strong and independent. They won't be liars and cheats like their mother. So take the money and get out of my life. I shot back, my anger finally surfacing. She stared at me as if I were a stranger. Fine, she hissed. I'll take the money and agree to the divorce. Okay, I'll set it up, I replied, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and regret. With those words, she got out of my car and slammed the door shut. A moment later, she sped out of the parking lot, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The next day, I filed for divorce on grounds of adultery. A week later, I arranged to meet Holly at the girl's apartment. The sale of my house had gone through, but I wouldn't invest any money until the papers were signed. We both tried to be polite in front of the girls, but the tension was palpable. I handed Holly the money, and she signed the papers, her demeanor shifting between relief and sorrow. I kissed the girls goodbye, wishing Holly luck as I headed for the door. Just as I was about to leave, she burst into tears again. But I sensed it was more for the girls' benefit than her own. Sophie and Ava exchanged knowing glances, they were perceptive enough to catch the emotional undercurrents. I'll see you next weekend, Dad," Ava said as I walked to the door. I paused, glancing back at the scene in the living room. Holly was still sobbing, but no one seemed to pay attention to her. Suddenly, I recalled what Ava had mentioned earlier. "Oh yeah, the Coldplay concert," I exclaimed, snapping back to the present. "Are we going to meet you in London, or should we drive together?" Sophie asked. "I'll talk to Amy and let you know during the week," I promised, glancing back one last time before leaving. As I exited, I heard Holly yelling something, but I chose to ignore it, stepping out into the cool air and the uncertainty of my new life.